Welcome back. Today's video we're going to walk you through the repair procedure on a WSI 60,000 psi normally closed valve assembly. We're going to start in the vise, take off the actuator and the nozzle tube and stuff, and then we'll go to the bench here and I'll show you how to get the actuator itself apart. So to start the repair procedure, we'll put the valve body in the vise with the actuator up. Remember, these are normally closed valves, so you definitely want to apply air pressure to the top of it before you start taking the actuator off. Once you get the air pressure applied, you're going to loosen the actuator, use a strap wrench. Back it off a few turns, and then you can release your air pressure. And at this point, your actuator, you should feel no resistance because you've backed that spring tension off of the valve stem inside. Once you get to this stage, unscrew it, set it on the bench. Now we'll turn the assembly sideways and we're going to loosen the 9/16 Glen nut and then the bottom of the valve. At this point, I take it out and go to the bench. Once you get on the bench, I'll go ahead and remove the rest of the Glen nut from the bottom of the valve. I'll go ahead and take the collar and the Glen nut off of the nozzle tube so we can take all these parts independently to the washroom. Now we have the seat in the bottom that's still in there, as well as the valve stem in the top. I usually start at the top. I'll take a wooden dowel rod or some type of plastic. I never use any type of metal object in the valve itself, and I'll push down on the valve stem just a small amount. It forces the seat out of the bottom of the body itself. After you get the seat out, I start from this end with my dowel rod and I'll push up to remove the stem and seal from the body. Once you push that out, you can discard these items or put them to the side. We're going to be putting a new kit in it. So the stem, seat, seal, those items we're going to go in the trash. At this point, your body's open. It doesn't have anything in it, and it's ready to go to the washroom as well. Now we're going to take the actuator assembly apart. To remove, this is a normally closed valve. There's a lot of spring tension on this. So to pull this assembly apart, we're going to remove two screws 180 degrees from each other, and we'll install two longer screws that actually go through the assembly and will allow us to back these off to separate the assembly slow. So I'll show you how to do that. Like I said, you loosen two screws that are 180 degrees apart, remove them from the actuator, install your long screws, just hand tight. Once you get these just snug, then you'll remove the 4 remaining screws. Once you get all the original short screws out, you'll notice that the two long ones are protruding through the bottom of the assembly. You'll back these out about 2 or 3 turns a piece, and then going from one side to the other until it loosens. Once you have all the bolts removed from it, you set it down, remove the top cap to the actuator assembly, set it down flat. You can use the same wooden dowel rod you pulled your seals out for. Remove the top plate. Now the actuator housing is free and ready to go to the wash. We're going to put a kit in this valve, so the top and bottom plate above your spring and the O-rings will be discarded. The spring also comes in the repair kit for the actuator. If you want to reuse the spring, you can. I would suggest when you have to do a repair on the actuator itself to replace spring, O-rings, and the nylon pieces all together. Once you get the piston out, there's 2 O-rings on it. You'll take a small, you can use a small pick or anything wooden if you want to. Just be careful and don't really gouge into there and try to scratch things. Piston's ready to go to the wash. And now the bottom plate's ready to go to the wash. Okay, so that's got our valve disassembled. We'll take all these parts to the solvent tank and wash them there, and then we'll move to the regular sink and we'll wash it with real hot soapy water. That gets all the old goop and contamination off of the parts and stuff, and we'll get all of our parts laid back out, cleaned and inspected, and I'll show you how to put the valve back together. Okay guys, we just got back from the solvent tank and the sink. Notice how I've got all the old goop and grease and stuff removed from all the components. This is the point where you'd want to lay everything out with your new kit and get all your parts out, so you'll have everything you need right here. It's also a good time to take and inspect everything at this point. Make sure that you inspect all your stainless threads, bore condition, and take a really good look over to make sure that there's no defects in anything. If everything's nice and clean and free of defects and stuff, then we're going to go straight in putting it back together. I like to start with my actuator, so I usually start with the bottom plate. I'll take a small amount of green grease on my index finger and I'll just rub the face of this plate in a circular fashion, and that puts a small amount of that grease in that O-ring groove, and it coats the entire surface with a little bit of green grease. Then I take my small O-ring and I'll lay it on that, over top of the O-ring groove, and just kind of gently work it into that groove. It's a small O-ring, so if you guys get to pushing and pulling on it too much, you'll actually stretch it and it won't fit in there. That's the reason I just like to take my fingers and gently push it into the groove itself. Once you get that in there, we'll go to the piston next. Piston's got 2 O-rings that goes on it, one small, one large. I'll go ahead and put the small one on there. You just start it in the groove on one side, roll it into place, and do the same thing on the large one. Start it in one side and just roll your fingers around. It'll roll it right into place. I still got a small film of grease on my fingers, and I'll just rock that around on those O-rings and make sure everything's coated. And then you can slide it into the bottom plate of the actuator. Now we're going to put the spring set and the neoprene pieces on. Notice that the bottom piece has got a 45-degree angle cut into the ID. It goes down against the face of that in the stem. You put that part down, flat side up, put your spring on, and then the top piece with the small cut towards the top. At this point, I'll take and lubricate the inside of my actuator housing with some green grease again. I take some, put it on my index finger, and I give everything in here a small coat. I do that a lot of times to protect the aluminum from any type of moisture or something that you would see in an airline. It just helps protect the aluminum over a period of time. And it lubricates the area where your O-ring is going to be moving up and down inside your actuator. Once you have everything lubricated, you can set it down on top and just kind of somewhat align your bolt holes. At that point, we're going to pull this actuator together with two longer bolts. You notice that these are the bolts that would come out. You can get two bolts that are about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch longer, and I use those to pull the assembly together. Remember, they're stainless threads, stainless bottom plate, so make sure you put some high purity goop on your threads before you start any kind of thread. Once you start them, I hold the assembly pretty well straight down, maybe just a little bit of an angle, and I'll run the bolts down until they're touching. Once they come in contact with the housing, then I'll take about 3 turns and then go 180 degrees, 3 or 4 turns, and work yourself back and forth until you've pulled the assembly together. Once you've got your assembly pulled together, we're going to put the 4 remaining bolts on the outside. Remember, a little goop on each one. And then you can tighten those 4 down. Now just barely hand tighten at this point. Once you get these 4 tightened down, then you're going to take out the 2 long bolts that were 180 degrees apart. You'll take those back out. And then install the 2 remaining bolts. Now once I get them all hand tight, I'll go in a cross pattern and then final go all the way around. So I would start here holding on to it, cross, and then I'll go around the part. And you don't have to get real crazy with it, just make sure they're good and hand tight with a small T-handle Allen wrench, holding it on with your hand, and that's as tight as you need to get around the parameter. Once you get all your bolts tight and stuff, then we'll set this aside and the actuator's been completed. And then we'll move on to the valve body. When I do a repair, I like to start with putting the seat and the nozzle tube and gland nut into the bottom first. So when you do that, you turn over, there's a small counter bore inside here that the seat's going to set in. I take just a small amount of goop between my index finger and the thumb, and I just rotate that seat where it's coated in a small film of goop all the way around, and then I just drop it into the bore where it sets down in there. I'll take my nozzle tube, slide my 9/16 gland nut on it first, and then install my collar. Once you get those two into place, then we're going to put some goop on the gland nut threads. I coat those first few threads all the way around, then I'll take my index finger, wiping that into those threads. You want to get at least the first 3 to 4 threads goop in that before you continue. We're just going to hand tighten that for now. Now we're ready to insert our stem and high pressure seal and backup ring. There's a tool that you can use to do this. The tool's got a big counter bore in this end and a small one in this end. You're going to start with the big bore and put your high pressure seal in, the black O-ring down. Then you're going to drop your brass backup ring in second. It'll go down inside the bore. You're going to take just a little bit of white food grade grease and put on your stem. You're going to push the pointed end through first, so the pointed end is going to go into your seal. And then when you do that, you can push against the table that you're standing on, or you can turn everything upside down to do it. I usually push against the table itself. And I push it all the way down where it's flush. After you're done, you can pull the assembly out and notice that it offsets from the flat end to the back of the brass backup ring about 1/4 of an inch. At this point, you'll put some white food grade grease on the entire assembly. You turn your seal tool over with a small hole and you set it in there, and now you're ready to insert it into the body. If I've got it on a bench like this, I will invert the valve body upside down and start from the bottom. If you're doing this work and your valve is still mounted on the machine itself, you can of course take the seal assembly, stick it in from the top, and then start your seal tool on and your thread and screw it all together. You know you're all the way down whenever you can't see any threads on the seal tool itself. At this point, I'm ready to go to the bench or the vise, and we're going to tighten down the rest of this and install our actuator. So we'll go to the vise next. I start by putting my valve body in the vise where my nozzle tube and stuff is stuck out either the right or left hand side. It doesn't really matter. We're going to tighten the 9/16 nut down now. These 9/16 Glen nuts torque is between 75 and 80 foot-pounds. Once you have the Glen nut tightened, we're now going to stick our actuator on. I turn it into vise so that the actuator side of the valve is facing up. I put a small amount of goop on the threads of the actuator itself, and I rotate my index finger around, wiping that goop into all the threads. And then I'll simply just start the top of it. And you turn it all the way down gently by hand until it comes in contact with the top of the stem. It's a normally closed valve, so you have to apply air pressure to this valve before tightening the actuator all the way down. So just kind of run it down until you can tell it's touching. And then you're going to apply air pressure to the top of the valve. Once you've got air pressure, you'll notice the spring has picked the pressure up off the valve stem. At that point, you can tighten the rest of the actuator the rest of the way down. When you get to the bottom, you back it off a small amount and just slap it together. You don't need to use any kind of strap wrench or any kind of pipe wrench. You just slap that together by hand, and that's all you need. Then you can relieve the air pressure. Once you get your actuator put back into place and you've got your Glen nut done, your repair work on your valve is ready to go, and you're ready to go back to your machine. Thank you for watching.